I froze just outside Dad's office, my hand tightening unconsciously around the worn wooden doorframe. The words I overheard inside hit me like a weight on my chest. "We can't afford both," Dad said, his voice low and cold, like he was negotiating a business deal. "Rachel gets priority. She has a future in law. Chloe, it makes more sense for her to stay at the bakery." The bakery. Those words cut deep into the pride I'd spent 21 years building. I heard Mom's voice, soft and hesitant like always, trying to push back. "But we promised to support both of them. Rachel's got potential. Chloe just needs to be more realistic. It's what's best for her," Dad said firmly, without a hint of doubt. I stepped back, feeling like the floor had just vanished beneath me. My whole life, I'd tried to believe I was just being overly sensitive, that Mom and Dad always favoring Rachel, giving her the best of everything, was just in my head. But now, the truth was laid bare. I gripped my keys and coat tightly, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. If I didn't leave the house right then, I might say or do something I'd regret. "Chloe, where are you going?" Mom called out as I rushed down the stairs, coat in hand. I looked up. Rachel was standing on the stairs, her golden hair cascading over her shoulders, dressed in designer clothes. "Mom's making family dinner. Will you stay?" "Family dinner." I almost laughed. Just another performance where I always played the nameless extra. "I'm not feeling well," I muttered, voice tight. "I need some air." "Wait, Chloe." Rachel came down, fake concern plastered across her face. "What's going on? You're acting weird." "Everything's perfect," I said with a bitter smile. "Just like you. Just like everything in this family." Rachel paused, her blue eyes wide with confusion. "What do you mean?" "Think about it," I said coldly, before turning for the door. I had just opened it when Dad's voice barked behind me, sharp and commanding. "Chloe, come back here right now." I turned, facing the man I once believed would always support me. Mom and Rachel stood behind him, worry written across their faces. "Why?" I asked, my voice echoing through the house. "So you can look me in the eye and say I'm not worth investing in? That I belong in a bakery while Rachel becomes some prestigious lawyer?" Dad's face darkened. "You were eavesdropping?" "Yes," I nodded, feeling a strength I'd never known. "And I'm glad I finally heard the truth. Chloe, please." Mom stepped forward, eyes brimming with tears. "Can't we just sit down and talk? Like a family?" "Real family," I scoffed. "What family? The one where Rachel gets everything and I get a few scraps and empty promises?" Rachel's voice trembled. "It's not what you think." "Isn't it?" I turned to her. "What do you call it when they gave you private school, summer camps? Well, I paid my own tuition since I was 16. When you got music lessons and I worked 2 jobs. Silence. Nothing but the sound of wind slipping through the cracks in the door. "If you had just tried harder. Like Rachel?" Dad began, but I cut him off. "I did try," I nearly shouted. "I got straight A's, worked non-stop, and for what? It was never enough." Mom's face blurred behind her tears. Rachel looked down. Dad just stood there, disappointment carved into his features. "You should go clear your head," he said coldly. "Come back when you've calmed down." "No need," I replied, gripping the door handle. "I'm not coming back." I slammed the door behind me, the sound echoing into the quiet night. As I drove off, tears streamed hot down my cheeks, but beneath the pain, something small flickered. Hope. For the first time, I was choosing my future. I drove like a ghost through dark streets, hands clenching the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I didn't even know where I was going until the porch lights of Aunt Grace's house glimmered through the mist. That old Victorian with its faded blue walls and the familiar scent of lavender felt like a lifeline in the middle of a storm. I pulled up to the curb and sat in silence for a few minutes, trying to gather what little courage I had left before knocking. Aunt Grace opened the door almost instantly, as if she'd been waiting. "Chloe?" she said, her voice warm but full of concern. "Oh, honey, what happened?" That simple question broke something in me. I threw myself into her arms like a child, letting the tears flow. She didn't ask anything else, just led me inside, made peppermint tea, and wrapped me in the same scratchy old blanket from when I was little. We sat in the living room, soft light from a table lamp casting a golden hue on the faded paintings lining the walls. I told her everything, every word I'd overheard, every wound I'd carried for years. Aunt Grace listened without interrupting, without offering hollow comfort like, "It'll all work out." When I finished, she quietly got up, walked to a dark wood desk in the corner, opened a drawer, and pulled out a thick envelope. "I was saving this for when you graduated college," she said hoarsely. "But I think now is the time." I took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were papers and a worn little bank book. I flipped it open and stopped breathing. The number printed clearly, $124,300.00. "What is this?" I whispered. "Been saving for you since the day you were born." Aunt Grace smiled softly. "Your parents had a fund for Rachel. I quietly started one for you, just in case a day like today came." I stared at the number, stunned. Part of me was overwhelmed with gratitude, the other part aching from the realization that the one person who truly believed in me wasn't my parents. "But why?" I asked, voice cracking. "Because I saw what others refused to see," she said, eyes firm. "I saw you doing homework under a dim light while your sister went to music class. I saw you working weekends while your family threw parties. Chloe, you deserve more." I cried again, but this time the tears carried hope. I hugged Aunt Grace tightly, holding onto the one steady light in my life. "I believe you'll do amazing things," she whispered. "And now you have the means to begin." I clutched that bank book like it was a lifeline. For years, I thought I only deserved leftovers. Not anymore. I was going to rewrite my story. With my own hands. That night, lying in the guest room's old bed, I opened my laptop and started researching business programs. It wasn't just a dream anymore. With what Aunt Grace had saved, I could chase my passion. Without begging, without settling. As the first light of morning slipped through the window, I had made my choice. I'd found my school. I closed my eyes, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. For the first time in my life, I truly saw the future in my own hands, waiting for me to claim it. 3 months later, I stood in front of Westbridge Business School, holding a brand new student ID card with the name Chloe Bennett printed in bold. A quiet pride rose in my chest. I'd gotten here on my own. No favors, no one else deciding my fate for me. The first few days swept by like a storm. Packed class schedules, group projects, late-night presentations. But every time exhaustion hit, I thought of that dim room at home where I used to study alone while Rachel strolled the mall. I thought of the family dinners where I was just a shadow behind my sister. Those memories fueled a fire inside me. I chose to major in business administration with a focus on entrepreneurship. Every lecture, every word sank deep into me, igniting a new kind of hunger. Not just to succeed, but to shine, to prove they were wrong. While I focused on lectures and mapped out my future, Rachel's life started to fall apart. Spectacularly. That evening, as I worked on a marketing strategy paper in the library, my phone kept buzzing. Messages poured in from old acquaintances I hadn't heard from in years. "Chloe, have you seen the news? Your sister Rachel is everywhere. Rachel's boyfriend just got arrested." I froze. For a moment, I couldn't believe it. Then curiosity won. I opened the local news site. Right there on the front page was a familiar face. Jake Hamilton. Rachel's longtime boyfriend, being led out of the Hamilton & Co. finance building in handcuffs. The headlines screamed, "Biggest fraud scandal in the region, millions lost, dozens of families devastated." I leaned back in my chair, heart pounding. Jake, the golden boy my parents always praised as the model I should follow, turned out to be nothing but a con man in a tailored suit. And it didn't stop there. The report mentioned that lower-level employees, including Rachel, were under investigation for possible complicity. All those grand stories at family dinners had suddenly gone up in smoke. I set the phone down, emotions spinning. Part of me felt vindicated. Another part felt heavy. No matter what, Rachel was still my sister. A new message popped up. From Mom. "Chloe, come home immediately. We need to talk. Family matter." I sighed. Of course. I was only remembered when they needed damage control. I closed my laptop and packed my books, but this time I didn't rush. I moved with caution. This wasn't the old Chloe who begged for approval. This was Chloe Bennett, business student with a future wide open. And I wasn't going to be dragged back into the shadows. As I drove toward Aunt Grace's house, watching the hurried crowds outside, a strange sense of detachment crept in. I didn't belong to that world anymore. The one where worth was measured by last names and shallow connections. I belonged somewhere else. Somewhere I was building with my own hands. When I turned onto the narrow road that led to Aunt Grace's house, I took a deep breath, bracing for whatever came next. Because this time, I wasn't walking alone. I had belief, I had knowledge, and most of all, I had freedom. The very thing they never thought I was strong enough to claim. As I stepped into Aunt Grace's house, my phone buzzed again. A third call from Mom in under an hour. I declined it silently, not wanting to disturb the peace of this place. But less than 5 minutes later, the doorbell rang. Frantic. Aunt Grace answered it. There stood my mother, disheveled, her usually perfect hair in a messy bun, eyes red and swollen from crying. I'd never seen her like that. "Chloe, you have to help the family," she said, nearly sobbing, grabbing my hand. I held my ground, voice cool. "Help how?" "Rachel, she's in serious trouble," Mom choked. "They're investigating her. They think she might have known about Jake's fraud and said nothing." My chest tightened. I'd expected this since reading the article, but hearing it from her still shook me. "The lawyer says we need to pay restitution to get the charges reduced," she went on, her voice trembling. "But we can't afford it. We'll have to sell the house, even the summer property." I dropped into a chair. The house where Rachel and I used to play, the sunflower field Mom once planted. Everything was being put on the line to buy Rachel a second chance. "And what do you want me to do?" I asked, voice dry. She gripped my hand like a drowning person. "Can you help us financially? You have the money Aunt Grace gave you." I smirked. Of course. Now they remembered the savings Aunt Grace had quietly built for me, the one they never cared about. Until now. "That money is for my future," I said calmly, "not to cover for mistakes the family chose to make." Mom staggered back like I'd hit her. "Chloe, please, she's your sister." I clenched my fists under the table, holding back the sob in my throat. For years, I'd been the shadow behind Rachel, always sacrificing. And now that I had a real chance at life, they wanted to pull me back. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "But I can't do that." She didn't say another word, just looked at me with desperation before walking out, leaving the door slightly ajar and the cold wind rushing in. In the days that followed, the scandal blew up. Rachel was suspended from the finance firm she'd once bragged about endlessly. Photos of her, once flawless in designer clothes, now appeared in the press with headlines like, "Key suspect in fraud investigation." My family descended into chaos. The house in the suburbs was listed immediately. The summer property, filled with childhood memories, was mortgaged within a week. I received message after message. From my parents, from relatives who'd barely remembered I existed. They all said the same thing, begging me to come back, begging me to save the family. I read them all but didn't respond. I knew if I gave in, I'd go back to being the silent sacrifice that kept their perfect mask from cracking. And I'd sworn I'd never do that again. That night, sitting on Aunt Grace's balcony with an open accounting textbook on my lap, I got a short text from an unknown number. "Chloe, I need you. It's Rachel." I gripped the phone. The streetlights blurred through the mist. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but another part, the part that still ached from shared blood, tightened inside my chest. Rachel, the girl who once had everything I wanted, was now free-falling, and I was her last hope. I looked up at the endless night sky. Maybe life was bringing me to my most important crossroad yet, a choice between forgiveness or walking away forever. I stared at the screen, her message still blinking. My heart pounded, caught between pity and old wounds. After a long silence, I typed just 2 words. "Where at?" 30 minutes later, I parked in front of a small cafe on the outskirts of town, where yellow lights glowed faintly over puddles left by the rain. Inside, Rachel sat curled up in a corner booth, stripped of her usual confidence. An old coat clung to her blonde hair damp and stringy, her eyes, once full, now puffy and hollow. I sat across from her without a word. She looked up, her face a mix of guilt and desperation. "You came," she whispered, her voice raspy. I crossed my arms, gaze sharp. "Talk." Rachel clutched her coffee like it might keep her from falling apart. I know what Jake did was wrong," she said, voice shaking. "But I didn't think it would go this far." I stayed silent, watching. "The truth always starts with the tip of the iceberg. I noticed things almost a year ago," she went on, hands trembling. "Files, numbers that didn't add up. Jake said it was just smart strategy, that everyone in finance does it." I tightened my grip on the chair, feeling anger rise like a tide. "And you believed him?" "I wanted to," Rachel whispered. "I was scared that speaking up would ruin everything I'd built. My job, our parents' trust, the image I'd tried so hard to protect." That hit harder than any excuse. For years, she'd lived in a glow gifted by our family, and to keep it, she chose to look away. "So now what?" I asked, voice cold. Rachel fumbled in her pocket and pulled out a wrinkled paper. "A deal from the DA's office. They'll drop the charges if I testify against Jake." I glanced at the paper. The terms were clear. This was her one chance to avoid prison. "But I don't know what to do," she said, tears falling. "Mom and Dad, they want me to stay quiet. They're afraid this will ruin the family's reputation." I laughed, a bitter, dry laugh that echoed in the quiet cafe. "Of course they are. Their image matters more than our lives." Rachel's shoulders slumped. She looked so small. "There's no one else I can ask. You're all I have left." I gripped the coffee cup in my hands. My whole life I'd been used to standing behind Rachel, only remembered when the family needed someone to take the fall. And now, once again, she had come to me. "I think you should sign it," I said slowly, each word sharp as stone. "Not for the family, not to save face, but for yourself." Rachel looked up, eyes brimming with tears. "I think you should choose the truth instead of holding on to something that was never real to begin with," I continued, voice firm. "If there's any self-respect left in you, do the right thing." The silence between us felt as heavy as lead. Rachel bowed her head, tears landing on the agreement in her hand. I'm scared," she whispered. "Good," I replied. "It means your conscience still works." After a long pause, Rachel nodded. "Will you come with me?" she asked, her voice barely above a breath. I looked at her, heart torn between the past and the present. Then I stood and grabbed my coat. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. City Hall. Rachel nodded again, like it was the last lifeline in a storm. I turned to go, but before I walked away, I left her with one final sentence. Soft as a breeze, sharp as a blade. Don't expect me to carry this for you, Rachel. This is your fight. The next morning, I stood outside City Hall right on time, wrapped in a black coat against the crisp, early fall air. Rachel was already waiting on the steps, nervously fidgeting with the edge of her folder, dark circles under her eyes. When she saw me, she hurried over, but I only gave a small nod, keeping just enough distance for her to understand I was here for the truth, not for some version of sisterhood that our family had long stripped of meaning. A staff member from the district attorney's office met us. We were led into a small, plain room, just a meeting table, a few chairs, and a recording device in the center. The air was so heavy it felt like even breathing was loud. The prosecutor, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, looked Rachel dead in the eye. Are you absolutely sure you want to disclose everything? She asked with zero softness. Rachel glanced at me, searching for support. I sat with my arms crossed, face unreadable. This was her choice to make. Yes, Rachel whispered, then clenched her fists and spoke louder. I'm ready to tell the whole truth. The statement took nearly 3 hours. Rachel confessed that she had noticed irregularities in the financial records months ago, but chose silence. Believing Jake's explanations and fearing the loss of her job, her parents' approval, and the image she'd worked so hard to maintain. She detailed how Jake asked her to cover up documents, their private conversations, and even emails she had once ignored. I sat quietly the entire time, never interrupting, but inside, every word she said cut through me like icy blades, reminding me of the childhood I'd spent fighting for a sliver of attention while Rachel was handed everything on a silver platter. When it was over, the prosecutor signed the non-prosecution deal. Rachel would testify as the lead witness against Jake in exchange for a suspended sentence and a civil penalty. Outside the room, Rachel looked like she'd aged 10 years. She turned to me, lips trembling. Thank you, she whispered. I couldn't have done this without you. I looked at her, emotions tangled inside me. You did this for yourself, Rachel, not for me. And don't forget, you owe the truth, not me. Rachel bowed her head, hands clenched tightly. I knew she understood, and if she didn't yet, she would have to learn. The word that Rachel had turned state's witness against Jake spread quickly. The media, TV, and social platforms erupted with headlines and sneers. No one called her the darling of the Hamilton family anymore. She had become a symbol of betrayal and downfall. Her former company issued a termination notice right after her statement. The event invites, the glamorous parties she used to attend, they all disappeared without a trace. Rachel lost everything: her job, her reputation, and the favored spot she held in our parents' hearts. My family, instead of reflecting on their mistakes, fell deeper into blame. I heard they pinned it all on Rachel, said she had disgraced the family name. Meanwhile, Jake, the one who started it all, was busy trying to negotiate a reduced sentence. I didn't bother to follow up. That world no longer belonged to me. That evening, sitting in Aunt Grace's living room under the warm glow of the lamp, I reviewed the scholarship paperwork I was preparing to submit. I felt something washing off me, as if years of filth and guilt had finally been rinsed away. I didn't come to settle scores. I didn't come to save anyone. I came for the truth, and more importantly, to save myself. A week after Rachel signed the non-prosecution agreement, I got a call from Dad. The familiar number flashing on my screen made my chest tighten, but this time, Chloe? Dad's voice came through as soon as I picked up, hurried and tense. The family needs to talk. Please come home. I paused. Just say what you need to say. I'm busy. He seemed caught off guard by my tone. After a pause, he sighed. It's about Rachel. I closed my eyes. Of course. It's always about Rachel. She's struggling to find work after the scandal. Dad rushed on. Her reputation's taken a huge hit. Every finance firm has turned her down. Your mother and I think maybe you could help. I tightened my grip on the phone. Help how? You have a good relationship with Mr. Matthews, the owner of the restaurant group you're interning for. Maybe you could get Rachel a job in admin or operations, just to get her started again? I almost laughed out loud. Of course. I only mattered when I was useful. You think she's right for that job? I asked evenly. Rachel's smart, Dad said quickly. She just needs the chance to prove herself again. What about me? I asked coldly. I'm smart too. I needed a chance too, but back then, when I asked for help with tuition, you said no. That's in the past, Chloe, he snapped. The family needs you. Rachel needs you. I sighed, feeling that old, familiar exhaustion settle into my bones. The family needs me, but never once actually treated me like family. Don't say that, he growled. You're one of us. No, I said flatly. I was the backup plan. You remembered me only when Rachel fell. On the other end, I heard Mom whispering something to Dad, her voice shaking. Maybe she was crying. Years ago, I would have caved instantly, but not anymore. I'm sorry, I said, voice steady. I won't recommend Rachel. I won't risk my reputation. What I've built to fix what you helped break. You'll regret this, Dad snapped. Family is family, Chloe. No one can replace that. Family, I repeated, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. If you truly saw me as family, you wouldn't have chosen Rachel over me, again and again. I hung up, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Outside the window, golden streaks of late autumn sun stretched across the sidewalk, beautiful and cold. That night, I received a string of texts from Mom. Pleas, guilt trips, even painful accusations. I read every word, then deleted them all. I was no longer that girl behind the door, longing to be seen. I had chosen my path, and once I started walking it, I knew I would never look back. The next day, I received an official email from the Matthews Group. I was hired as a regional assistant manager with a salary 3 times higher than my internship. As I read those words, a weight lifted from my chest. Like all the baggage I'd been carrying had finally fallen away. I looked up and saw my reflection in the mirror across the room. Steady eyes, calm gaze, and a smile no longer forced, but the smile of someone who finally knows their worth. 3 days later, just as I finished my shift at Matthews Group, a thick envelope sat waiting on my desk. The sender, Aunt Grace's personal attorney. Inside were a heavy stack of documents and a handwritten letter. My dear Chloe, Aunt Grace wrote in her familiar script, if you're reading this, it means the truth needs to come to light. I didn't just save money for you. I've also spent years collecting evidence to protect you and Rachel from the dark schemes your parents put in place. I flipped through the pages, financial statements, transfer records, forged contracts. Every piece pointed in one direction. My father had used both my name and Rachel's to set up shell companies, hiding illegal financial transactions. The savings Aunt Grace gave me weren't just an act of love. They were an escape route she'd been building for years. I clutched the file, fury rising in my chest. All those years I blamed myself for not being enough, for not being better, only to realize I was just a pawn in their twisted game. That night, I called Rachel to Aunt Grace's house. She showed up in simple clothes, her face pale. When I placed the file in front of her, she opened it with trembling hands. It wasn't just you they used, I said firmly. They used me, too. Rachel flipped through the documents quickly, each piece of evidence shredding whatever trust she had left. By the end, she looked up at me, eyes filled with horror and rage. They did this to both of us, Rachel whispered, her hands clenched so tightly they turned white. I nodded. And now, we have a chance to take everything back. We scheduled a meeting with our parents at the company office, the very building they'd once boasted about to the entire town. When Rachel and I entered the boardroom, our parents were already seated, with the family's lawyer by their side. Dad frowned when he saw us together. Mom's face tightened with visible worry. I set the folder on the table and slid it across. We need to talk. Dad picked up the papers and flipped through a few pages. His expression shifted instantly, from confident to pale. Mom quickly leaned in to read, her hands starting to shake. Where did this come from?" she stammered. "Doesn't matter," I replied coldly. "What matters is, if we turn this over to the FBI, everything you've built will come crashing down overnight." Silence blanketed the room. Their lawyer tried to maintain composure, but I could see the alarm in his eyes. "You have two options," I continued, my gaze icy. "One, we hand this to the authorities and you face criminal charges. 2, you sign over the entire company to us, effective immediately, and step away from all business operations permanently." Dad's fists clenched. "This is outrageous." "No," Rachel said, her voice firm for the first time. "We're correcting the mess you created." I slid over another set of papers, the prepared transfer documents from Aunt Grace's attorney. "Everything's ready," I said. "Sign it." Dad glared at me with pure hatred. Mom began sobbing uncontrollably, but this time I didn't flinch. No more begging, no more fake embraces. Under pressure they couldn't deny, they finally picked up the pens. Dad's hand shook as he signed, like every stroke drained a piece of his soul. When it was done, I gathered the documents. Rachel walked beside me, no longer the timid girl hiding behind others. We left the boardroom, leaving behind the ruins they had built with their own hands. 3 months after ousting our parents, Chloe Bennett and Rachel Bennett were officially named co-CEOs of Bennett Holdings, the new name proudly mounted on the company building, replacing the outdated Hamilton Capital that had once stood for deceit and manipulation. On our first day as leaders, I walked into the boardroom feeling the crisp hallway air, but it didn't shake me. Beside me, Rachel wore a simple gray suit, her hair tied back, her gaze steady. We overhauled the entire company, removing our parents' loyalists, those who'd turned a blind eye to their shady dealings. We hired young, fresh minds who believed in building, not hiding. Alongside restructuring, I began pursuing a vision I'd long nurtured, investing heavily in restaurants and hospitality. With support from Matthew's group, I launched The Haven, a restaurant chain blending modern cuisine with vibrant community space. Rachel handled all legal procedures and expansion agreements. We didn't just rebuild, we grew. 6 months later, Bennett Holdings was no longer just a small-town finance firm. We owned 7 restaurants, 3 green investment funds, and a fintech startup valued at over $10 million. The day we signed the franchise deal for the 8th Haven location in Chicago, I sat quietly by the window, gazing out over the city glowing beneath us. Memories rushed in. Those nights alone in a dark room. The mornings I stood behind the bakery counter while Rachel attended conferences. Now, I wasn't just surviving. I had triumphed. Rachel tapped gently on the glass, breaking my thoughts. "Chloe?" She smiled. And for the first time, her smile felt real, no longer a polished mask. "We've got investors from New York waiting. They want to fund the next round of expansion." I turned to meet her determined eyes. I nodded. "Let them wait 10 minutes. We're celebrating first." Rachel laughed, sinking into the chair across from me. I poured 2 small glasses of champagne I had saved for this moment. The clink of glass was soft, pure, a quiet promise. "To everything we lost," I said. "And everything we'll build," Rachel added. I raised my glass, eyes drifting to the vast night sky. We were no longer the girls pushed to the edge of the family story. No longer pawns in a game of control. We were the ones writing the story now. After the investor meeting, Rachel and I drove through our old neighborhood. The bakery where I was once sentenced to a life of limits had changed hands. A new sign hung outside. Clara's Bakery, a silent, powerful tribute to Aunt Grace, the only one who had believed and protected me from the beginning. I parked the car and stepped out, standing quietly by the window. The smell of fresh pastries filled the air, warm lights glowed, and laughter spilled out into the night street. The place that once symbolized the limits my family set had become a beacon of the freedom I had claimed. Rachel came to stand beside me. "Do you think Aunt Grace would be proud of us?" I smiled, the kind that rises from the soul. She always believed we could do it, even when the world didn't. We stood there a long while, letting the night wind brush our hair, letting traffic rush by. Because in that moment, for the first time in our lives, we weren't chasing anyone anymore. Chloe Bennett had stepped out of the shadow of her past and built a life of success and freedom through resilience and talent. Once dismissed by her own family, she rose to become co-CEO of a thriving enterprise, expanding her business empire with confidence. More importantly, she and Rachel, once torn apart, had become fierce allies, rewriting their fate together. Chloe knew real victory wasn't revenge. It was living a life she could be proud of, free from anyone's control. What do you think about Chloe and Rachel's journey of growth and redemption? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more moving, inspiring stories about family and life.